Okay, it is my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Chiara Rapallini. Chiara has published widely on a number of topics, including demography, public economics, personality theory, and economic outcomes. And today she is presenting a meta-analysis of personality traits and earnings. Usual stuff, the seminar is being recorded, and could you please mute your microphones during the presentation? But please feel free to ask questions during the presentation. Just unmute yourself and interrupt if you have a question. Chiara is happy to answer as she presents. Okay, with that, floor is yours, Chiara.
Okay. Thank you very much for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to present this work, which is co-authored with Gianmarco Alderotti from the University of Florence and Silvio Traverso, who is working at the University of Trento. The motivation of this meta-analysis starts from two seminal papers published on the Journal of Economic Literature and the American Economic Review in 2001 by Bowles, Gintis, and Osborne that present a list of puzzles. The first of these puzzles is the fact that apparently similar individuals in terms of age, schooling, labor market experience, and parents' social economic status receive quite different earnings. The second puzzle is the fact that is the empirical evidence that the advantage of the children of high socioeconomic status parents go considerably beyond this economic status and the genetic inheritance of cognitive abilities. The third, but not less important puzzle is the fact that seemingly irrelevant personal characteristics such as beauty, personal physical aspect or attitude like that of keeps a clean house are often robust predictor of earnings. To take into account for addressing all these puzzles in these first contributions, Bowles et al. Propose a behavioral model for earnings that include these employees' characteristics and call them incentive enhancing preferences. Starting from this very first contribution, nowadays there is a quite important empirical evidence that that finds support of the fact that labor market remunerates not only cognitive skills, but also individuals' non-cognitive abilities. This empirical support is based on both experimental settings, experimental studies in which real effort tasks are used, or large survey data analysis that are now possible because of the inclusion in survey data of a small inventory of personality traits. Along the same span of time, among personality psychologists, the construct called Big Five has collected an increasing consent, even if for sure is not the only way to measure and describe personality. This construct is verified with factor analysis and isolate 5 dimensions that are mainly orthogonal and that are labeled as follows. Extraversion, that you maybe already know, these 5 dimensions. The first is, and so I go quite quickly. Extroversion is the attitude to be active, forthcoming, and desiring social relationship. agreeableness is the attitude to being friendly, warm, sensitive toward others. Conscientiousness is the attitude, the behavior to being systematic, goal-oriented, self-disciplined, and so on and so forth. Neuroticism is what characterizes people who worry about is particularly worrying, is being frequently nervous, emotionally unstable. Mental openness is the last dimension, which is mainly based on two facets. The first is more approximated by being imaginative, creative, curious, and unconventional, and a second phase that is more based on proxies of mental cognitive abilities. Our contribution is the following. We perform a meta-analysis and a meta-regression analysis. The first one is a way to synthesize the results of different empirical studies that in this approach are called primary literature. Generally speaking, this is a very general way of presenting meta-analysis. This approach uses effect size that are an index chosen by researchers that represent the direction and magnitude of the association between two variables, in our case, personality and earnings, that needs to be comparable across studies and for which standard error should be computable. As an example of the most commonly used effect size, there are correlation, partial correlation coefficients, standardized mean differences, and odd ratios. In our paper, we use the Pearson R partial correlation coefficient. The meta-regression analysis is a step forward in this kind of work and allowed to include moderator variable, testing what feature of primary studies affect estimates. As for example, if the inclusion or not of a variable may change the estimates, or if the sample, if some sample can change the outcome, if the econometric model is relevant. We hope that this approach, this methodological approach, can help in investigating, shed more light in a few still open issues on this literature. The first one is very simple, is the following: how and to which extent each trait of personality contribute to explain earnings? This is the very first question that we want to answer by summarizing the existing empirical evidence. The second important open issues is the following. Personality for sure has an effect on education in choosing, in people with different personality choose different career and have different preferences for schooling. But personality affect also productivity and performances in the labor market. From another side, education affects labor market outcomes. So the open issues is if personality has an effect on earnings that go beyond education and cognitive skills. Another open issue, in our opinion, is if there is a different effect of traits in predicting earnings according to the worker's gender. The idea here is that maybe some traits can help women in their labor market experiences, while, for example, men may be helped by other kind of personality. The fourth question, open question, is if personality traits are reinforced or not by individual experiences in the labor market. Here, the problem is very close, is connected with the open debate among personality psychologists and as a consequence on economics about the stability of personality. The issue is if there are events in the life cycle that may affect some personality traits, or in which direction. Generally speaking, the idea is that personality may change during the first years of life, mainly up to adolescence, and then personality seems to be quite stable until retirement. What we want to try to test, or to try to investigate, if individuals' experience in the labor market change something in this main evidence. The last question is if there are sectors of the labor market that promote individuals with a given personality, and or if there are sectors where a given personality is detrimental for economic success. So this is what we want to try to answer in this paper. How we select primary studies. We work with Scopus, and we use the following criteria. The paper have to be written in English and have to belong to one of the following Scopus subject areas: business management or accounting, business economics, econometric and finance, psychology, and social sciences. These are the areas that we take into account. In this research routine, we want that either the title, abstract, or in the keywords, there are words or expressions related to earnings and words or expressions related to personality or intelligence. More precisely, we want that the following terms are included in the title, keywords, or abstract: Big Five, personality, extraversion, agreeables, and so on and so forth. As for earnings, we use as a synonyms earnings, income, salary, and every word beginning with wage. Adopting this research procedure, we obtain a list of about 280,000 potentially relevant documents. The procedure was stopped in January 2021, and we look at papers published by December 2020. 3 additional rules were adopted for choosing the paper, the final sample of papers that are included in the meta-analysis, and the rules are the following. Only papers in which the dependent variable was a direct measure of the level of personal income were selected. Then we dropped papers in which the dependent variable was related, for example, to subjective status or occupational prestige or career advancement and so on and so forth. We have to exclude also paper in which household income is the dependent variable. We exclude all papers in which personality was not measured by bit 5, and we excluded the papers reporting simple correlations. In the coding process, we work all three authors together, and some papers were overlap in order to test if all our three we follow in a coherent way this rule of selection. This is a flowchart that show you the selection process from the starting records. We ended with 65 studies that were, in our opinion, according to our rules, completely comparable, and we coded 936 effect sizes. I can give you more detail on the process, but I go through the results. As I said, 65 studies published in 46 journals. This is a span of time included, and an important caveat is the following: we try to select what we consider the main effect size by the author of each paper. And these are the sample of effect size we have in bold. You have the main effect sizes, while in brackets there are all the effect sizes for each studies. To give an example, to be clear on what kind of problem we have here, consider a paper using a large survey data set and adopting three or one of two econometric models. Our point is what kind of, where we have to take the effect size, which is mainly the coefficient and the t statistics. We do both in the sense that for a first analysis, we try to understand the model that authors consider the most robust, what they seems to prefer from the text. Together with this main effect, we coded all the other effects, and we perform our analysis with both these kind of information. Here you have a graph in which the selected primary studies are presented by year of publication, and you can easily see that this topic is increasing, taking attention in the last 5 years. And here there is a graph that show you how this topic is shared by different disciplines, in the sense that here is the papers that are econ and business and business journals. Here there are psychological psycho journals. The papers that are common are, for example, Journal of Economic Psychology, or a journal who share in the title and in the aim and scope social sciences, the more general social sciences field as the main field. Here, first, I go to the results in order to have time to discuss what we find. Here, there is a very simple way to summarize what we have, which is the so-called vote counting procedure. Vote counting is simple because we group the results of the primary studies according to the sign and the level of significance of the effect sizes. And what we can have, for example, is that if we look at the first trait, which is mental openness, we have that 33% of studies find a positive but not significant effect. And the same is for conscientiousness, extroversion, and the other traits. What is important, in my opinion, from this first outcome? The simple counting of effects show a concentration on non-significant outcome, not significant results. You can see that I put in bold negative and positive, not significant. While the first three are positive effect and the second two are negative effect. The meta-analysis that take into account the mainly the observation in each sample and the standard error of each size effect give the following results. The first three traits, openness, conscientiousness, extraversion, show a positive and statistically significant effect, while the agreeable and neuroticism must have a negative and significant effect on earnings. Then, our first conclusion is that meta-analysis confirm the sign of the effect of each trait on earnings, positive for the first three and negative for the other two, while it allows us to underline that this effect is statistically significant, which is quite different from what we had with simple vote counting. Just to show you what changed over time in the work that we have used, you can see a first big evidence is the fact that in the last years, since I would say 2015, samples are bigger, and then that are represented by the dimension of the ball in this graph. What we have is that when the sizes became bigger, the size of the sample of the original studies, the size effect of each personality trait seems to be smaller. If we compare, for example, for openness in the first study, the effect seems to be in magnitude quite important, while in the last study is close to zero. But for sure, here the result is robust, is more robust. Another important point of our investigation is about the publication bias. There are two ways to try to understand if there is a publication bias. The most intuitive is that of funnel plots. And here, the robustness of the results in terms of publication bias can be inferred looking at the symmetry of the distribution of the works, which are the bullet in blue here, which respect to the estimated size effect, which is the red line. Here we added also the potentially missing effect size due to publication biases that can be imputed using the trim and fill method that we employ for this kind of test, and that are not so seems not to change any evidence in this respect. As for the meta-regression analysis, what we have are the following are here illustrated with the following slides. First and foremost, my preferred results is that education for sure is a variable that, when included in the primary studies, reduces the effect of both openness and conscientiousness on earnings. Here you have to imagine the fact that there is a dummy variable that signal when the original study take into account the level of education of the subject, or include a proxy, a measure of cognitive abilities. If there is this kind of variable, control variable, in the original studies, the effect is reduced, but is still positive and statistically significant. So the way in which I interpret and we interpret this outcome, the first outcome, is that these two traits, affect earnings, and this effect did not vanish when estimates are controlled for the education level and the cognitive abilities. Another important point is, in my opinion, the fact that extraversion and neuroticism has a positive effect the first and negative effect the second on earnings, but this effect change according if the primary studies take into account the labor market, the sector of the labor market in which workers are occupied or employees. So we can say that extraversion is a personality trait that contribute in affecting economic success in the labor market, but not in all economic sectors. And neuroticism has a negative effect on earnings for sure, but this effect is reduced or differentiated according to labor market sectors. This is a first way to make a comment of these results. As for the way in which personality traits are measured, here there is two kind of control variables that we use in the meta-regression, that are the number of items used in the primary studies to measure personality of subjects, and the scale used for assessing personality. As you may see, these two controls is not to change the final results. And I would say that this is not a result, it's just a confirm of the fact that the inventory used in the primary studies to assessing personality are all valid, in the sense that if they change, they do not alter the outcome of the primary studies. The only important effect is for what we call early measurement. This effect is connected with the research question that I mentioned at the very start of the presentation. The idea is that there are studies in which personality is measured, for example, in the late adolescence or during the high school. And wages are recorded some year after. In that case, what we have is that agreeableness seems to be affected by the fact that wages and personality are measured in 2 different times, and the interpretation we give to these results is that the fact that primary studies can measure personality in a time that is before the time in which people works, reassure us from the fact that when people are in the working ages, the experiences in the labor market do not change personality in a strong way, if not as for the agreeableness traits. This is the way in which we interpret these results. We do not find strong evidence that the outlet of publication change a lot, while the time trend maybe as a role in explaining some evidence of our meta-analysis, but we have not any particular interpretation of this evidence. Last important result is that related to the sample used by primary studies. What we have is that if the primary studies are based on sample in which workers are only women, the openness, the openness effect seems to be the effect of openness seems to be the most important. How we can interpret? We can interpret saying that maybe the main effect of openness on earnings is driven by outcome of studies focused on women or female workers. Then we make some robustness check that I just list here to give you an idea of the analysis. We repeat the analysis on the whole sample of the effect sizes. As I said to you before, the results that I present here are focused on what we call the main effect, that is in a way arbitrarily chosen by ourselves, and then we replicated the analysis on the whole sample, and results still there, main results still there. We repeated also the meta-regression on the whole sample of size effect, and we verify if the result of the eventual analysis are robust to the model specification, because I present you the random effect model of meta-analysis, but a fixed effect model can be also performed. Then I go quickly to the conclusions that are the following. A simple vote counting of the results show that the effect is not unique. In most of the studies, the sign of the coefficients are either positive or negative, and p-value is more than 5%. So we define these results as not statistically significant. While the meta-analysis and the meta-regression analysis show that the 5 traits are statistically significant in the correlation that have the expected sign, in the sense that openness, conscientiousness, extraversion are positive, while agreeableness and neuroticism are negative. And the distribution of the 5 effect sizes not show shapes that are desirable, because they exclude a publication bias effect. More in depth, the sign of the moderator's coefficients show that the positive sign of the extraversion effect size reduce when labor market is considered. The sign of the conscientiousness trait decline when education is considered, and that of agreeableness increase when early measurement is included, and neuroticism decrease when labor market is considered. Here I do not put the mental openness effect that is like conscientiousness is decreased when education and cognitive skills are included. So these are what we have, and thank you for your attention. I hope not to be to go too quickly, but I'm now open for questions and comments.
Thank you, Chiara. Any questions? Yeah, Klaus?
Yes, I have to confess I'm not an expert in meta-data, meta-analysis like this. So maybe it's a very stupid question. You are losing lots of, so to speak, observations while coming from your very big sample of studies to the studies you really are looking at. Is there any way to establish methods to judge how much you lose by going down in terms of credibility? In a vague sense, I understand that it's not an easy situation, but starting with a few thousand of studies and looking at 60 or 70 might look at least potentially problematic.
Yeah. Thank you for this question. So I can go back to this flowchart. The process is the following. There is a routine in Scopus that produce this high number of records. And the routine, of course, is, as I said, ask for putting in the title, abstract, and keywords these words. Is a very, I want to say, very simple routine. When we add this group of studies, we make a first screen on the abstract in order to be sure that the paper that we are looking are a kind of paper that we need. And as you can see, we excluded here the big majority, the big majority of papers. There is also the fact that there are records in which author's name is not available, and sometimes there are. This is one case. In other case, we have to write to the authors for having the for example, a standard error is the bigger problem, because we can have a paper that exactly study what we want, big five and earnings, but where there are not standard error. For us, for these methods, standard error are absolutely needed, and then we write for having papers. Not always we get. So this is a problem. Then another issues. For example, we do not want papers in which personality. We do not want papers of clinical psychology. For example, looking at depression and labor market outcomes, because it's not our topics. So in this first screening, even if in the abstract there is personality and earnings, you may find some paper which is quite far from what we want. So first exclusion. Then full text light reading in a very here we lose mainly what we called only correlations, because if there is not if there are only correlation, we can't consider. And the last is full text complete. In that case, in that step, we start to coded the effect sizes, in the sense to put coded means take the coefficient, the standard error, information about the sample, and so on and so forth. So I can understand your point, but this is my first meta-analysis. What I understood is that the analysis is stronger if you make more. If this selection process select a sample of studies that the more similar they can be.
I understand. I mean, I understand that the data set has to be comparable at the end. Otherwise, a comparison does not make sense. But it may, as you say, it may. I mean, some of that. What you explain now better is some of the material is just, let's say, not really relevant for your research question, and that's why this material can go. But others, let's say 342 records, might be maybe some marginal information is missing. People are not answering, and it's like with missing observations in data sets. Yes, so this may not be a problem, but it might be a problem. I'm just asking, okay, but you may not have enough experience with that. What one is doing to be sure that one is doing the maximum what one can do to exploit previous studies.
Yeah, you understand that there are two kinds of problems. The first selection is that the routine take papers that are quite far. When you go further, there are other kind of issues.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
John?
Oh, great. Well, thank you very much for the presentation. I was just thinking a couple of suggestions. it would, I think, be interesting to see, like I think on your slides 18 and 19, when you're looking at sort of additional control variables. Yeah, exactly. So I guess what would be interesting to see is sort of what would be the the main effect, the naive model main effect without any control variables, and seeing what these additional control variables are explaining away. So, maybe regression 1 just with a constant, and then show us those results as well. Show us what, how much of the constant is being explained away, to give us an idea as to the importance of these other covariates in terms of explaining some of these effects. That would be the one question, or the one issue. And the other issue was, I was just thinking in terms of like assessing the analyses that you've got. I mean, effectively, you've got an analysis of analyses, and in some sense, there's going to be quite a few studies that are going to be statistically identical to this main study that you're doing. In other words, you've got a mean effect, and then you've got sort of two standard deviations left and right. And to start looking at the studies that fall into that sort of statistically the same category, and those that are sort of outliers, and maybe doing some additional analysis as to the outlier studies. So trying to sort of categorize, it might be interesting. Is it just the sort of like the AER type publications that are, close to your mean that you've estimated, or are the AER ones sort of quite far away in terms of some sort of a categorization, I would say. Anyway, those are, I guess, kind of things that I would just be. I've never also done a meta-analysis before, but I was just thinking in terms of trying to give us a feel as to what's going on, and are the results that you're giving us sort of indicative of things that it would be sort of like a goodness of fit measure, in the sense of, yeah, I mean, if it's all the JELs and the AERs that are basically confirming what you're saying, then that's probably a good thing. Okay. As opposed to being a far outlier from those. I don't know. I'm just sort of thinking in how I would sort of try to package it. Thanks very much.
Okay.
A very interesting topic and very interesting analysis.
Thank you very much. Very, very good insight. As for the first, what we have is that the model without any control gives us this constant in a way.
Yeah, exactly.
Why when we introduce I
think you want to put those on the same slide.
Okay. Okay.
And really contrast what it is that you're explaining away.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Is it sort of add one at a time in a way? So that's the idea, isn't it? Add cognitive skills and then see how much that kind of explains away or whatever, and then add labor market to the next. I don't know if that is just to get a sense of the effect of each one of it, maybe as well. I don't know.
Sorry, I lose your first sentence.
I was just thinking that maybe add one at a time, the controls.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
So
more
I guess the thing
specification.
is we're looking for sort of where's the insight into what is sort of impacting on the main constant, right? I mean, the main constant is where the action is, and that's what you care most about. And then you've added additional, effectively, control variables, and you're wanting to discuss, you know, what's left still.
Mm.
And so, yeah, getting an idea of where's the sensitivity, where's the yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I just have a small question to ask.
Just hang on, Fanny. Sorry, I've got Julie and Christian before you. So
Okay,
Julie?
okay, that's okay, because that's okay, no worries.
Yeah, thanks. Hi, Fanny. Thanks.
Yeah, greetings.
I have a question about the publication bias, and I know this is not your focus of your paper, so it may not be a fair question, but if you could go to your slide that shows the publication bias, sort of scatter plots. So just generally thinking about publication bias, which I don't do a lot, but it intrigues me. You don't have information, I think, on articles that are not published, and so how do we distinguish from these plots the difference, publication bias from just sort of a distribution around the truth?
Yes, good question. When if you decide, because it's a decision and maybe is a decision to work only on papers published, the only way to say is that there is no publication bias is that because is looking at the distribution around your estimated size effect. And what we can see is that here there not seems to be any shape different from a quite symmetry, a shape which is symmetry with respect to the red line. An alternative perspective.
Your conclusion is, sorry.
So
from these plots, you conclude there's no publication bias. Is that right?
Yes, the alternative is to include working papers and papers not published. Which is not
okay. Great. I think I just misunderstood how you interpreted these plots, and so your conclusion from these plots is what? That there is no publication bias, or there's no evidence of publication bias. Is that correct?
Our conclusion is that there is no evidence of publication bias.
Okay, terrific. Okay, thank you very much. I wasn't used to reading those and wasn't sure how I missed the conclusion from them. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, Christian and then Fanny.
Okay, thank you very much. This is a very nice presentation. I learned a lot. I have one question. I know that the way you measure Big Five can have some implication on the result. And there are questionnaires which have like 44 inventory items. Some of them have like 50 or even more than that. The World Bank has the STEP data, which has, I think, 20 or even 16. So my question is, did you have in your review of studies any indicator that assess how you measure these personality traits? Because I think most of them are subjective measurements, but someone could tell you maybe, if you use objective measures, you can have different results. So I just wanted to know if you did have any indicator that addressed that issue.
Yes, thank you. We have, and is here. We coded the number of items. Each primary studies use an inventories that, as you said, may be a very short inventories like that in German socioeconomic panel that include, if I well remember, 10 items. And the first Big Five inventory included 60 items. So the range is quite important. And my guess at the very start of the studies was that different primary studies looking with measuring personality in this different way can have a different outcome. What we have is not like this. Even the scale in which people have to rate their own behavior and attitude or seems to matter. My conclusion is that because of that inventories used in primary studies are generally speaking validated by personality psychologists in a first study proposing an inventory. And my conclusion is that these validation studies, these primary validation studies should be quite good if no differences emerge, at least from our point of research in this case. We coded, just to be clear, we coded studies in which inventories are very short and studies in which inventories are quite large. But it seems not to be a problem or to signal a difference.
Thank you very much. Another question is about the sample size. One of your slides, you mentioned that recent studies have larger sample size. Can you tell, I don't have any idea about how many observations they have. Do you have any idea about what do you mean by larger sample size? Like,
yeah. Thank you. There are two surveys that are the larger. They are the German Social Economic Panel, which are thousands of observations, and the Russian survey on subjective well-being, and that include the personality traits. And here we got sample of 14,000 subjects. So when then there are the BHPS and ILDA, which are the British and the Australian social surveys that are quite big. These four are the most important. These results are driven by studies performed in these four surveys.
okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay, Fani, let's make that the last question.
Okay, so can we go to the previous slide? I mean, slide number 18. I just have a question about education. So when I'm looking at the education variable, how is the education variable coded?
Education, the interpretation of this outcome is the following. If the primary studies control for level of education or years of education, we do not make any differences. There is a dummy equal to 1. If the study do not control, the dummy is equal to 0. Then how we interpret this outcome is the effect of the openness rate of earning is positive and statistically significant, but is smaller when the education is taken into account.
Okay, so I mean,
here
okay.
there is the minus sign.
Okay, I mean, because when I was looking at the negative, so one thing I'm just curious, maybe if I look at your first column, that openness one, when you look at the, how about you interact between your cognitive ability variable and education and see what happens? Because what happens is, I mean, because what I was thinking is maybe the education variable is that if you have like high education, low education, or medium education, I don't know, it's not the case, I guess. But if that's the case, maybe you can even find out whether the level of education will have some effect. But,
okay, we can make we can control also for the considering both, but when I talk about education, I means only that in the primary study, researchers include information about education.
Okay.
In some way.
Okay. Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you. Because that negative sign was bothering me, so that's why.
Chiara, I think John has a suggestion in the chat. John, do you want to say it or?
Yeah, no, I was just sort of thinking further about this idea about categorizing journals, and I was just thinking that that could be just simply an additional explanatory variable in the sense of being able to, if these are journal articles, then match some sort of a journal impact factor or someone's sort of quality rating, and just simply add that into the regression. Does that?
Yeah, we coded this point. We take the Shimago classification.
Okay.
And I do not present the results,
okay. Yep.
but we take this kind of information. Of course, we have the journal, but also we put a sort of
like
rank.
a top tier or a low tier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we can do what you suggest.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Perfect timing. Thank you so much again, Chiara, for a very interesting presentation on a very interesting topic. I'm sure there are claps going around the world. And thank you for everybody who contributed and asked, feedback, gave the feedback and questions. Thank you, and we'll see you in about a month's time.
Okay.
Bye.
All the best.
Thank you very much for questions and the opportunity.
Bye-bye.